Good morning. It is 10:15 a.m. on Friday, October the 22nd, 2021. I am here on behalf of the Houston Asian American Archive. Today, I am interviewing Miss Lou Sivaminda Pendon on a video call. Thank you, Miss Pendon, for joining us for the oral history collection.
My pleasure.
All right, let's get started. So can you tell us where and when you were born?
I was born in Orani, Bataan, that's the Philippines. And I was born on January 26, 1942, right in the beginning of the World War II uh, in the Philippines.
Can you tell us the story behind your name?
Okay, my parents named me Luz Viminda. And the Luz Viminda stands for the big division of the Philippines and the Philippine Islands, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. So the first syllable of its division of the Philippines, so Luz Viminda, became sort of a common name there because we were under Japanese time, war suppression in the Philippines. My parents felt patriotic and named me for Luz Viminda. And which, by the way, I was born in the mountains because we were running away from the Japanese. Because immediately after the bombing of the Pearl Harbor in December of 1941, they invaded the Philippines. And Bataan is close to Manila. They invaded Manila first and then went to Bataan. So the townsfolk, all the people in the town were running up in the mountains. And as third, so I was born in the mountain. So
Was that like seeking refugee during the
yeah, we were it's the whole family and siblings were all my mother already had 2 children then. I was number 3 of 10 kids. So she was pregnant with me and we were all running in food with all the other relatives, taking shelter because the Japanese were going to town and burning the town. So we were running up to the mountains and of course I was already, my mom was went into labor in January and I was born in a hospital. It was just there's some relatives that know how to deliver babies and with the help of other so it's kind of historical the way I was born, not in a hospital setting, but out in the mountain, and I survived. So God put me here for a purpose.
So how would you describe the household you grew up in?
Also, yeah, when I was growing up, I said because I was born during the war, so just from the stories, of course, it was hard times because they were the story goes, as I heard it from my parents, is we were running from one place to the other. There'll be somebody, of the relatives on the watch out if Japanese would, they'll form a, he would stop and they'll make a makeshift, just shelter for us in the evening. And then when they would know the Japanese would be coming again, they'll dismantle the nipa hut and then go to other places. So we were just constantly on the run, and that's from the stories. And it must have been a hard times until we got liberated, and until the war was over in 1945. So in my early, 3 years old, I don't remember much, but just from the stories I heard from my parents, it was hard just going from place to place until it got settled and we went back to town when and soon build a house in town again. Yeah.
And you returned to the town that you were born in?
Yeah, that town that's the same, Orani, Bataan in the Philippines. And yeah, I was there until well, you asked about growing up, so I was just there until I was 5 years old, and then at 5, I went to Manila, and as the story goes, it's like I think when I was 5, my parents were saying I was kind of losing weight, no appetite, and all that, and they wanted to take me my father took me to Manila, where I have a grand aunt that's in Manila, who's a faculty member of the Philippine Women's University. They said they'll take you to Manila so we can, go to the doctor and see the pediatrician, and check you out, because we're about like 3 or 4 hours drive from, the province where I was born to the city. But as soon as I got to the Philippine Women's University, where my grand aunt was residing, I kind of fell in love with the place, and I'd like to stay there. So I asked her if I could just stay there. So my growing up is I grew up mostly in the city, at the Philippine Women's University, where my grandmother was teaching, and I just was an intern, like a boarding, it's a boarding school kind of thing. Yeah, it's part of my growing up. Most of my growing up is from 5 years old on to high school and freshman in college. I was in the Philippine Women's University with my grandmother. It's really a grand aunt. Yes,
During that time, did you often go back to visit your parents?
Yeah, I would go on the when summer breaks, and just in the summertime. So grew up with her I went to school there, so it's a prestigious, university. And but until the summer times, the 2 months vacation that we have on the summer, I've always looked forward to, going back to the town, to the parents. It's a small country town, and so it's kind of living a kind of double life. My life is different when I'm in the university in Manila, in the city, then versus being in the province, on the summertime. But I've always looked forward to, being, with, being staying with my parents during those, 2 months of summer vacation, when I'm out of school. And the way I got, there was also, the way I got to that university, as I said, I was 5. And then I said I wanted to stay there. So my grand aunt asked me, well, if you go to the university president and ask her permission to be staying in the university, if she allows you to stay, I'll let you stay. So that's it. I went to the president of the university and asked, I like it here, may I stay here? So I was the youngest of in there. It's kind of, it's a boarding school. I was the youngest one that stayed there for the first 2 years there. They set up a bed in the teacher's room where all the faculty members were staying. And then on my 3rd grade, they transferred me to the other dorm with all the other, the other older kids. We were staying. So that's I grew up kind of, different world, going back to the country and the simple living, and then living in the university with, the big buildings and, and all the amenities of the university. So that's, my growing up.
Would you describe that as a traditional way of learning in the Philippines?
And not really, yeah. Well, the you know the university where I went is kind of, like as I said, a boarding school. The usually rich people's kids would, uh, be boarding there, and from the different parts of the Philippines, and they want their kids to go to the city. They'll, and then mostly also relatives of faculty members, were my friends that were living in the dormitory with us.
So while you were growing up, what were your parents' occupations?
Yeah, they stayed in the province. My father was sort of a businessman in dealing with they owned fish ponds, seafoods. Yeah, and I knew it was kind of like the distributor. He would go to the market early in the morning, all the fishes that were caught. He would sell back to business women that will take it to other markets in other parts of the Philippines. So he did that, yeah, for a while. Was, just in, uh, and they had rice fields to the, so both fishing and farming were both the predominant occupation, in the province where my parents were. Mhm. And my mother was a housewife, but she did her part in helping out with the family. She would be cooking like delicacies to sell, and she had a little store at our house that she managed. So that's how mm, they were living. Mhm.
So, what were some of the values that your parents and your great aunt emphasized in your upbringing?
Okay, well, it's always, I just from their example, I know they all are work hard to make a living and make it comfortable for us. And they had very devoted to the family values. They told us, yeah, we went to church and had good Catholic family background, and yeah, they just that's so that yeah. And my grand aunt, she's a professor, and she says just be the best that you can be. And growing up, I always I've always remember her telling me is whatever is worth doing well. So the value of hard work is in there, and she really focused on that, and being the best that you can be, and dream on, and you can be whatever you want to be. Mhm.
Great, that's wonderful. Transitioning into sort of your nursing schooling. So,
Mhm.
what college did you attend for nursing?
Well, and so as I said, I was in PWU for longest time, but then we had this my grandaunt and I was all the way to freshman in college already at the PWU, and we had sort of a serious conversation. What do you really want to do, for a living? And then she was at that time he was hearing about all this opportunity to go abroad if you're in the medical field. So at first I wanted to be a lawyer, but I did an aptitude test. No, that's not it. So my freshman year, we were on a freshman division class. We were doing all the liberal arts education, but I was focusing on education. I said, well, maybe I'll be a teacher. And then we had a conversation. Do you really want to be a teacher, or do you want to get to healthcare field? So I said, well, I guess healthcare, because since I love people, would fit my personality. But at that time, they were not offering nursing where in my school at Philippine Women's University. So we shop around for another college, and I moved to St. Paul College of Manila, which is close by, and started my nursing because they just started a nursing division right there. And so I took the entrance exam, and then I got in their nursing program. We were the first group to have the Bachelor of Science in nursing it's a 5-year program at the St. Paul's College of Manila. So, and it was a blessing because I became more serious in my studies when I was in college, besides that all the good time that I had, growing up with the same group of people throughout my elementary and high school years. So it was, but yeah, once I got exposed to taking care of patients, I loved, nursing. Mhm. And I graduated from St. Paul's College of Manila in 1963. And I was proud to say that my aunt and my parents were all proud of me because I did graduated cum laude, yeah, one of the 3 top in the class. And I graduated, I think, with 3 medals, one for clinical efficiency, and then on for leadership skills. So yeah, graduated with 3 medals with my, Bachelor of Science in Nursing. Mhm. So, and immediately after that, well, my I was offered scholarship to go to a master's program in nursing, so I never did work after my clinical in the Philippines. I didn't work. I went directly to the University of the Philippines, got a scholarship because of my undergraduate, plus the school where I graduated from, St. Paul's College of Manila, it was grooming me to be a faculty in that school. So the dean gave me some money to a scholarship to go to masters. So I went on to the University of the Philippines in, yeah, just immediately after graduation, yeah, registered for, yeah, work on my masters in nursing uh, at the University of the Philippines. So never did do work in the Philippines. Mhm.
When did you decide that you wanted to do nursing as a practice and not just teaching?
Okay. Yeah, when what has happened is because I didn't work at all in the Philippines, and had this opportunity. Yeah, it just came that my uh, well, I already had a job, yeah, waiting for me to be a clinical instructor at my school. And then my best friend in nursing also had a job already. We were just one afternoon just walking around, yeah, strolling around by the boulevard, by beach in Manila, and we saw a sign in a window that says, "Do you want to go to America?" So, well, just for curiosity, let's go in and find that out. So we went in. It was happened to be a travel agency, so we went in and said, "What is this all about?" Said, "Oh, the medical center in the United States are recruiting nurses. They're short of nurses in the Philippines, short of nurses in the US. They're recruiting nurses." Um, and said they all, they encourage us to go ahead and fill up the application. I said, "Out of curiosity, let's go just fill up the application, see what happens." So it's me and my best friend, and we just left the application form with them. And then within a week, we got a call, and they were ready to interview us and said, "Report to this such a Methodist church," because it was a Methodist hospital here at the medical center in Houston that was recruiting nurses. So report to this Methodist church minister for an interview. So I said, "Okay, let's go." So we did an interview, and then the Reverend Mosley, I think is his name. He was, yeah, yeah, felt comfortable talking to him. He was, he was impressed with our background. Even I said, "I don't have any clinical experience yet. I've just been in school, but that's fine." And then my friend too, they were both, he was both impressed with our credentials. So they accepted it. Yeah, said, "Yeah, you'll hear from us soon." And then I said, "Well," so we did. And then our parents didn't know that we were doing this, and said, "Well, maybe it's about time to tell them what we've been up to, that we've applied to get accepted." So we did. Yeah, went home and told them that, yeah, we've applied for this, and then we finally got a call and said, "Get ready to leave," and and we got the acceptance letter from the Methodist Hospital. So the biggest hurdle for me then was telling the dean, Mother Madeline, that sent me to the University of the Philippines and gave me the scholarship, to tell her that, sorry, I want to go to America first. But she was, when and my grand aunt said, "You better go talk to her face to face." So I went into the St. Paul College of Manila and talked to her. And I said, "I have this opportunity." And I said, "I can probably, yeah, I'm sure I'll be a better teacher if I have some clinical experience. And this is just 2 years anyway, so I'll be back." And I told her I'll be back. But at the same time, I did. My grand aunt said, return the money, so you're not obligated. So she gave me money to return the money that the university gave me. So I was kind of free. But she understood. She said, "Okay, yeah, I just wish you luck." And then, in fact, she wrote one of the reference letter for Methodist Hospital. So that's how I got to the States, under the exchange visitors program.
So it seemed like earlier your mom sort of nudged you into nursing as a way to get to the US. Was that not your
hmm
intention when you started nursing
hmm
or started studying nursing?
hmm That's right. Yeah, because by then, um, there's a lot of, yeah, they were recruiting nurses, and there were a lot of, people in the medical field. And when we got to, in 1964, we got to, most of the people in the medical center, from the Philippines, we were a small group of probably 100 or more. Mostly they're all in the medical field, either doctors or nurses being recruited. But that was an exchange, and we were under the program called the Exchange Visitors Program, and our visa was just for 2 years. So after 2 years, completed the program. You either have, that's all the State Department would give visa to us. The stay is just 2 years. So you either, go to Canada, and some of the nurses from the Philippines went to Canada and, got application there, or go home on, after 2 years, under the exchange video, because that's all the visa would allow. But yeah, and I the reason I got to stay is, I met my husband, and he came to the state as a student to go to school at Texas A&M, at about the same time as I did, about earlier, in '64 also. And we met, and then when we decided to get married, I was able to stay under the student visa, under him, kind of thing. So that's how I got to stay. Mhm.
How old were you when you first came to the US?
I was 22. Mhm. Yeah, so back then, the educational system in the Philippines, we went to, uh, the elementary was 1 to 6, and then you're already in high school from 7 to 10. That's already high school. So you're like 16 years old. You were already in college. So by 22, I already had my master's in nursing. So it's I was 22. Yeah. 22 and single, coming halfway around the globe to work at the medical center. And I was happy I did.
So you mentioned that you had a friend that you applied to the program with. Were there any other family or other friends that also moved with you?
No, in fact, she was we're the only two that knew each other. They were recruiting in groups. So there was 12 of us that got accepted, but we didn't know the rest of the 10, and we all just met in the airport. And then, of course, we bonded, after, we're all going to the same place, and we were all, both, nurses, so we all bonded. Plus, we were about the second group that came to Texas. So there were already Filipino nurses in the medical center. And that was a big help because they were the ones that, met us at the airport, the older ones that were already about to leave because their 2 years is up. So they, made accommodations. They arranged, where we were going to stay in the apartments, who's going to room with whom, and they furnished us, the with the bed sheets and pots and pans, to get us started on the living. So that was a plus for us because they were already Filipino nurses here, meeting us in the airport and getting us all settled and acclimated, and we kind of bonded, yeah, very well. And we were a close knit group. Because we all knew each other because there was like just over 100 Filipinos. They were all concentrated in the medical center. We all had the same, most of us living in the same, height, Park Towers apartment is what, is a high-rise apartment. So, and some of those, rental and duplexes, they were all renting, and, we didn't need car. It was right around the medical center. We just walked to, the medical center. Yeah.
So did that group of the Filipino community help you acclimate to living in the US or help combat homesickness in any way?
They sure did, because we're always, supporting each other. Plus, the other thing too that I probably hear, and it's of course very worthwhile mentioning, is Methodist Hospital provided us with good orientation, acclimation to the States. Plus, they also in conjunction with the Rice University, in fact, the Institute of International Education way back then, which is under the Rice University, they had, I guess, they recruited young couples in the Houston area to serve like well, they gave us an afternoon tea. So they invited these couples to come to Methodist Hospital, and they paired us one to one. Like I met, they kind of gave us like a foster parents kind of thing. But the idea is just for the an afternoon tea, to show you around Houston, and then the couple, and I was, I guess, another, God's plan for me. I met this couple. Their name is Mr. and Mrs. Rufus Preble. They're a young couple. They had just one daughter who's already married and out of the house. So they were by themselves. They came, and and I was the one, they were assigned to me and I was assigned to them kind of thing. And so we sort of, we just met for that afternoon, but we bonded. They drove me around Houston and then took me to their house, and there was that immediate bonding. And then they said, "Can we see you some?" Oh, sure, sure. And then since then, they're very, very close to me. They became, I call them Tutu and Grams. That's how their grandchildren would call them. Tutu is Hawaiian, I think, for grandma, and then Grams. But that's how even their daughter calls them, because that's how the grandchildren, calls them Tutu and Gram. And they were, very nice to me, and they would visit me when I'm off, or when I'm, on weekends off. I'll stay with at their house. They had me invite my friends to their house, so they treated me just like their own daughter. Yeah, when I started dating, I introduced them to Greg. They check out Greg, and all they really acted like, my parents, through the years, up to, when I got married. Yeah, took care of our wedding. Uh, and because my parents were in the Philippines when we got married, they couldn't come here. I didn't have any relatives here, and they decided to get married in Houston. So Gramps was the one that took me, down the aisle, and took care of our wedding, and even the traditional rehearsal dinner, which is supposed to be the groom side, and they also took care of all that. And then up to now, they've passed, but they acted when I started having children. They acted as, grandparents for my kids, and they would come to we moved to College Station already, or we moved to Freeport. They would come to Parents' Day, Grandparents' Day for my children's school, and went to graduations and birthdays. Yeah, it's just like real. They adopted me kind of, and I adopted them, and did not pass, but that relationship continued. My sister, foster American sister, is still alive, and then now their children and grandchildren, my grandchildren, that we're all still considered family. So even to this day, we know we still have close contact with them, kind of thing. The younger generation, because they both have passed away already. So that was one of the help too, that I got acclimated to the American culture. Because my very first Christmas, they invited me and asked, and said I can take my best friend with me. We went to her daughter's place, which is in Hamilton, Texas. And that's where I saw how Americans celebrated Christmas. And so that was a big help for me in transition into the US life. Because I had fortunate enough to have an American parents too. So that's, I guess I diverted. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. That was wonderful to hear. During this time, did you experience any major cultural shocks? Anything that was surprising?
Yeah, just I guess what I can think of. I didn't know how much about segregation. Didn't hear so much about that, and that was the '60s. So at Methodist, well, the experience, and we would just kind of laugh about it, is like the cafeteria. Uh, the basement, it says for blacks only, And then the cafeteria, this is at Methodist Hospital in 1964. The cafeteria on the on the main floor is for whites only. And then, nobody told us in orientation where the Filipinos belong. So we didn't know, but so we went to both places and nobody told us not to. So we just, wherever the food was better, we would eat. So, but it's kind of, and we didn't pay much attention to the segregation that was going on because they loved the Filipino nurses. So we got along with the blacks, we got along with the whites, and we had good working relationship with our supervisors, who are mostly white American supervisors and co-workers. So that was kind of a strange thing. And then what else can I remember? Oh, some of the little things like we didn't have a little kind of funny story which my grandchildren also enjoys hearing about is on the first few weeks we were out on taking care of patients. My patient called and I went in there and then she said she wants Dr. Pepper. So, well, there's no Dr. Pepper interview. So I went immediately. I was thinking, is Dr. Pepper is a physician. So I went to the nurse's station and pick up the telephone, saying, was going to page Dr. Pepper. And then everybody was laughing and said, Dr. Pepper was a drink. I didn't know we didn't have Dr. Pepper in the Philippines. So that was kind of a funny story. That these kind of things. And even like with food wise, we didn't have broccoli. I said, what is this green thing? So that kind of thing. So those were but we just kind of laugh about it. So funny anecdotes. But mostly we got along with co-workers. I personally did not feel any yeah yeah much of being ostracized because we're different.
Thank you. That was great. I would like to hear more about the challenges that you faced in your immigration process. I know that you were able to extend your visa once you married.
Mhm.
Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, we got married. I was staying under my husband's. He was J1, so I was J2, standing. So I was staying under a visa. The original plan was after his PhD, we would go back to the Philippines, but then martial law, our president declared martial law. There's a lot of political turmoils in the Philippines, and then my in-laws visited us and told us, you're safer here. So we started the process of applying for the immigration. So we applied and then, just sent in our papers and, just went on to work and, kept focusing on our career. But the process was long. Yeah. And we got a call that we were going in the early 70s. We already had 3 kids then, that we were going to the immigration office, and we got summoned. And then the judge was there, and then they told us that we were overstaying, that we were deportable. And so that was a shock because so then but we can again appeal the decision because that we were that we've overstayed our. So again we are by then we started hiring an immigration lawyer and did all the paperwork again and all those. And but we went on with life and went on with our careers and work and having children and but we never heard from them when we still didn't have the green card that they were saying. So it was a long process. And then finally we got called in the office again, and the inspector told us we were deportable because we were working illegally. I said, how can we work illegally? Every time they ask for papers and proof of our work, our bosses would, we write them letters and papers and all that. That we were legally working. So it just went on for forever uh, until finally, I guess our file got lost somewhere, Yeah, it was not until the 90s, when we were granted, we were granted the green card, supposedly green card, and then we had to wait another 5 years to get the citizenship. So the citizenship didn't come until 1993 or somewhere. So, but all this time, we paid our taxes because we were both working. So kind of thing. But it was just kind of long process of getting through the hurdles of immigration, and then losing our files got lost and got in the desk of somewhere that didn't resurface until the attorney kept asking them. So, but yeah, so it was all worth the wait. So, okay.
And you said during that entire process that you had an attorney?
Yeah, we played an attorney, immigration lawyer, attorney Williamson, that is specialized in immigration kind of thing. And an attorney to help us with the hurdle of all this paperwork and interviews and all that kind of thing.
Were they able to help with that lost file in any way?
Yeah, he was able, he pursued and pursued them, and then finally they when they found out that it was because by then I had all this approval, but we were in a waiting kind of thing approval. It's complicated immigration process, but we were just waiting. So, but they finally got it done, and then as soon as we got the green card, then you just wait for 5 years, because we immediately applied for U.S. citizenship.
One of the things that you mentioned in your file is that your children, you didn't want to be deported because your children had been so ingrained in US culture. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, because one of the one of the things that your defense of wanting to stay here is, would it produce difficulty on extreme difficulty on the family? I said yes. I said yes, because my kids were already born here, they were studying here, and they're acclimated to the U.S. Already. So one of the things that I had to write about and to explain to the court is it will be difficult for us to uh, if you're deported, of course we'll take them with us. But at that point, you're thinking, it was difficult for them to get adjusted to the Philippines because they were all born here. They had their friends here, and the living conditions back home were not as good then, because there's martial law, and then standard of education, and was substandard. So, but they were already used to going to school here, and they're doing well in the school here. So that's one of the defenses said is will produce difficulty on the kids. And then I had all the supporting documents to my employer were helping me. They were calling senators and congressmen, and they had all these supporting letters. I even went to the point that I wrote a letter, I think, to President Reagan, who was president then, explaining a case kind of thing. So but that is a sign of our defense. Because I wanted them to have the life here, because as I saw it, because I grew up in the Philippines, I knew uh, it will be difficult for them. Want them to have all the opportunities of living in America. So we tried really hard to get settled here and raise our children here. Yeah.
Were your children aware of the ongoing challenges you faced with the immigration experience?
Yeah, they were aware because we took them to court, with us, because wherever we were going, when there was a hearing, we took them, and then they knew I was writing letters. They were what is that? I said, well, just writing letters and to make sure. And I would show them the letters that my boss and, copies of letters to the senators that my boss made. So they were aware. Kind of thing. But they also knew that we were trying, our best to get them, here.
Since getting your citizenship, have you gone back to the Philippines?
Yeah, we see it was easier to travel than having the U.S. passport. So we've been, prior to pandemic, we were going home at least, every 2 years or so. But the very, very first time that we went home to the Philippines was like we never did until 25 years later. Then after that, when we got the citizenship, then we're, free to travel back and forth, and we've been visiting family. Of course, when my parents died, went home for the funeral of my mom and my dad and my in-law, same kind of thing. We took everybody home and we did the 50th wedding anniversary of my in-law. So yeah, they got to go to the Philippines to the kids. Yeah. Yeah.
How strange was it going back to the Philippines after being away for so long doing that
Yeah.
after that first visit?
Yeah, it's kind of an adjustment, but you saw, we saw the progress. Yeah, Philippines made some progress too, but I kept in touch with the friends that I grew up with from grade school on to college. So I kept in touch with them, and they would meet me. We would get together, and in fact, to this day, those childhood friends of mine, we're all in their nearly 80s, and we're all still keeping in touch. And with the pandemic, we would Zoom, kind of thing. So I kept in touch with them. And then when I had the last trip, we took the three older grandchildren, and I showed them where we grew up, both places. And I showed them the school where I grew up, and both for both the PWU and St. Paul's College. So they saw where we grew up, and in both provinces, my husband's place and my place, we showed them. So, and they like going there. Grandchildren.
Oh, I'm sure they like the food there.
Yeah, they've acclimated. Yeah, they like the food. They like the Filipino. In fact, when we have get together here, they still want us to have Filipino food. So they like that. When we give them parties for their birthdays and graduation, they will request Filipino food.
So, transitioning from your immigration story back to your career,
Mm-hmm.
what were you passionate about with your career in Houston?
A career, yeah, career in Houston. Well, I I did the first 2 years of my career at at Methodist. I love my work. I love taking care of patients. I was there primarily in intensive care unit, cardiovascular, because the claim to fame there and back there is Dr. DeBakey. Michael DeBakey, famed heart surgeon, was working at Methodist Hospital. So I like learning about cardiovascular. And then when we got married, I had to move to College Station because that's where my husband was going to school at Texas A&M. So I work at St. Joseph Hospital there. Did orientation for uh, the day shift for a while, and then I was working evening shift. And my first day of work as evening shift, it said S in my assignment. I said, so I went to the director of nurses, who's a nun. I said, what does S mean? It said supervisor. So okay, supervisor, the evening shift supervisor. I work as supervisor, and then I work as clinical instructor for the students that are affiliating at St. Joseph Hospital for their LVN program. So I also have a good relationship with the doctors and administration in at the College Station St. Joseph Hospital. Then I had to move back. We were having kids by then. I had to move again, economic decision. Because my husband was going for a PhD. I was kind of putting him to school with this with this just very low. I think it's $200 a month stipend in graduate school or something. So I was working. I said, "Oh, I get better salary if I go back to Houston." So I went back to Houston, and he was kind of commuting, staying with us on the weekends. Sometimes he'd midweek to visit us. But by then, I already had 3 children, um, and so I worked back. Then this time I went uh, to St. Luke's Hospital in Houston, and with another famous doctor there is Dr. Cooley. So, and I applied as a nurse educator in St. Luke's. And I was interviewing, the director of nurses said, "No, you can't do that. Yeah, you can't do that." I said, "Well," and then I also at the same time had an acceptance at Methodist as staff nurse. But then I decided to go to St. Luke's because it was a challenge when he said, "No, I cannot be a nurse educator." I said, "I want to be a nurse educator because I'm going back to teaching." So I did, and then within a week, because I was working with LVNs and yeah, a nursing assistant, they would hear how I was giving instruction to my coworkers. So the director of education did, "I want her in my department." So within 3 days, I I got my job that I wanted as a nurse educator, and I stayed in St. Luke's for another 3 years. Yeah, doing orientations for new employees, that kind of thing in under nursing, yeah, education. And then when my husband got the job at Dow Chemical Company, we moved to Freeport. At, and then there's yeah, I work for the community hospital of Brazosport, now Brazosport Memorial Hospital on Freeport. We continued, yeah, to work in there. Yeah, 27 years. Yeah, yeah. I was director of education. Well, at first I was under nursing, and then the CEO of the hospital said, "Well, nursing should not only have the education." So he asked me to create an education department hospital-wide. So I did a hospital-wide education so I could orient all the other departments, not just nursing. So I reported directly to the CEO, and then yeah, I had other departments under me. I did quality improvement, that kind of thing. So 27 years at uh, at Brazosport Memorial. So that was a good, yeah, experience for me and very supportive. Yeah, I went on and did a lot of studying on my own and yeah, continuing education. Uh, and got certification for quality improvements, also those kinds of things. So I missed the bedside nursing, got away from that and got to hospital administration. But 27 years, and also gave me a hospital gave me an opportunity, part of my job, to be involved in the community, and that's when I got more passionate, being of service to the community and doing health fairs, career fairs, for the community, inviting kids to the hospital tours and as I was sort of the hospital representative to community agencies like the county emergency planning kind of thing, and those, chamber of commerce, that kind of stuff. So that got more and more involved in the community. And when I retired, some of the projects that I started when I was still being paid at the hospital, I just continued doing as a volunteer. So I was a full-time volunteer. So the things that I've started when I was at the hospital, I just continued doing it in the community. Mhm. So my passion was, being of service to the community, because got a lot of blessing in my life. So it's a way of giving back to the community. Mhm.
Thank you. That was amazing. Did you think when you started nursing that there would be so much teaching involved?
Mhm. No, I thought I would do bedside nursing, and we did teaching too, teaching one-on-one to the patients. But I was, yeah, uh, it was pleased that my career led me to being able to share what I'm passionate about, my knowledge and skills to other nurses and other members of the community, members of, of the hospital staff, kind of thing.
Specifically with your community interactions, what organizations were you involved with?
Okay, well, right now, very much involved with the Rotary International. Yeah, Rotary is a service organization way back then, founded in 1905 or so in Chicago, just by a group of professional people wanting to be of service to the community. And I became involved in our area, which is south of of Houston, in the Brazosport community. I was for the originally this is an all men's club kind of thing. From the beginning, they really didn't start admitting women to the Rotary Club until like in 1989 somewhere. So I'm among the first women in the community that was a member of our Brazosport Rotary Club. So, but it is a good organization to be in because we do service projects for the community, and not just the community but international. Like our stellar project is the eradication of polio, to be only the second disease to be eradicated in the face of the earth. And right now, there's only two countries in the world. It's a worldwide organization. There's only two countries in the world that still have polio cases. And and then this year to date, it's just Afghanistan and Pakistan has polio case, one each for this 2021. So we're soon hopefully can eradicate polio. So I'm very much involved in polio eradication as in all the service projects that we do for the community. Brazosport Rotary Club, do a lot of community projects. Mhm.
And just for clarification, you're still involved with this group?
Yeah, I'm still. Yeah, got started when I'm still working, and I'm still at it, and then I'm still a member of the board, and I'm active also in the district. The district level, we're District 5890. There's about 60 clubs in the Houston and surrounding area, about 617 square miles that we're a part of the District 5890. And so I'm chairing the annual fund drive for the district. We always try to raise fund to uh, do all these community projects in the world. Uh, Donations to the Rotary Foundation helps the whole world. Now it's 1.2 million members in 202 countries. There's Rotary Club. So I feel comfortable going anywhere in the world. And we've done a lot of traveling, and say I'm a Rotarian, and then I can go to any meeting anywhere around the world to go to a Rotary meeting, because there's a weekly meeting, of the Rotary Club. We generally we meet every week.
Has your community involvement changed with the pandemic?
Yeah, our face-to-face, mainly we went on with our projects that we could do, but maybe the pandemic, we were doing Zoom meeting because we are obligated to meet we were doing meeting in Zoom, and then we transitioned to hybrid, and then now we since August we started face-to-face meeting again. But people that still don't feel comfortable, they're allowed to Zoom, with us. So we're still, continue with the projects that we do.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. I do want to ask, while your husband was going to school for his PhD, you were in Houston raising your children while also working full time.
Mhm.
Can you explain how you handled that
Yeah, it's just juggling time. We have help of babysitters and daycares and that kind of. When when we were the one in Houston, yeah, I would take them real early to babysit. And I was fortunate enough that the daycare that when they went through the Montessori school, I think it's still in existence here at the University Drive. Um, they knew that I had to be in the hospital by 7 o'clock, so I would, yeah, take the kids there by 6:30. The owner of the school was still in there. Jamie, she will just open for my kids. Just I'll leave the kids there until the school opened. The Montessori school opened, so there's a lot of help in there. And then I'll pick them up, and then we just we manage uh, doing that for several years until we all got together when he found the real job. Because but so as when he got through with his PhD, jobs for engineers were very hard to find at that time. We found the real job, the opportunity to work in Freeport. So we all got together and moved to Freeport area. And then now we live in West Columbia, which is halfway here, close to it's still south part of Houston kind of thing. Mhm.
Do you have any advice for younger generation Asian American women trying to lead a successful career while also raising a family in today's environment?
Yeah, it's just hang on to that dream and just kind of work hard, and things will work out. Just hard work pays have that organizational skill to in time management skill to be able to uh, raise the family and then go to work and still have time for. And but family is important to always have time for a family, and not just work, but I have time for a family, and that's what we try to do and be a part of what they do in school, and keep up with what's going on with the kids and raising a family. Just working hard.
Okay, I think that's a nice segue into our next chat about your family. So you touched briefly on how you met your husband.
Oh, okay. Um, I did come in 1964. He also came earlier even than that. He came to go to school at A&M. He had a sister that was in Houston, who just came before me. So through mutual friends, met her sister. So on the weekends, these Aggies would then it was okay to hitchhike. So they will this there's the Filipino community in at A&M were mostly graduate students. They were mostly sent by on Rockefeller scholarship kind of thing. They were mostly in agricultural because A&M is agricultural and mechanical school. There, from the University of the Philippines. In fact, they were all mostly scholars, and they're there. So some of them were single, some have family members. So the single guys would just line up. They want to go to Houston on the weekends. They would line up in Highway 6 and thumbs up, thumbs up, and then it's a ride. And people at that time in the 60s, they were, the people were very gracious. They'll have a sign where they want to go. They go to Austin and Dallas, San Antonio, wherever they want to go, and people would come by and give them a ride. So he comes to Houston because his sister is also working at the medical center in Houston. So when he came, um, to their sister's apartment. Her sister doesn't live with me. Apartment. There was a note. You go to our apartment because her sisters happened to be a good friend of one of our roommates that was one that accepted us in their apartment. They were ready to leave. So I was in my apartment by myself. Everybody was working mostly 3 to 11 shift. Yeah, but it was my afternoon now, so I was by myself in the apartment, and then there was a knock in the door. So, and I opened the door and it was him. It was him. And she said he was looking for my roommate, but who happened to be also at work. Was she working? She said, "Well, my sister sent me here because she's working." She told me to just hang out here until until off duty. And I said, well, your sister's friend is also working, so but you have no place to go. You're welcome to come in. So yeah, that's how we met, and we just kind of introduced each other, and yeah, got to know what he's up to at A&M, and then so he was there in the evening, so I was forced to feed him dinner because he was in the apartment. So, but that's how we met, just kind of knocking on the door, and I saw this the gentleman coming in with nice smile, and he was wholesome to talk to, and we got to talking, and he telling me all his dreams and goals and why he's going for his master's, and he wants to be a PhD in chemical. Oh, very, very impressive. Yes, a very goal-oriented gentleman. So I was kind of impressed. that, so that's how we met. And then a few more weekends he'd come and visit, kind of thing. So the rest is history. We got married before my 2 years was up for the visa, and then I moved to College Station. Mm. And then we had children, 4 kids.
Would you like to share a little bit about your children and like your early years of marriage?
Oh, okay. I was having children. We were still in College Station. He was in school. I was working, and we shared responsibility because I was putting him to school. So I would what when we've had the first child, Gina, the oldest one, I would he would go to school early and do all his work in school, and then I was working till 11, so he came home. Before I had to go to work, and comes home at 2:30. So he'll take over the babysitting job. So we'd put the kids to sleep, and then we only had one car, so he would haul these kids in the middle of the night at 11 p.m. to pick me up to go back home. And then that's sort of our routine. I took care of the kids for the daytime that I was there. And then when I had to work, he comes home to stay with the kids. And then if he had something else to do, he could go back to the office at midnight at A&M, and graduate student. So there's always something to do. So he would go and finish up. So it's just kind of help each other out until they're big enough to go to babysitter or daycare, preschool. And we just adjusted their schedule according to the needs of the children. Yeah, we had 3 kids while we were in the College Station area, and then we were already in Freeport when we had kid number 4. So I kept working until kid number 4 got through with college, and I said, "Oh, I'm done." so, so I retired at 57 when kid number 4 got through with college.
Oh wow, that's amazing. Thinking of your relationship, what advice would you give a young person, such as your children or your grandchildren?
Okay, same thing. Work hard, be of service to others. You sort of, service is sort of I heard that once and it stuck to my mind. The service is the price you pay for the space that you occupy. So you're kind of obligated to, just be true to yourself, have a dream, keep working hard. And this, my grandmother tells me all the time, whatever is worth doing is worth doing well. And kind of, my greatest pride is having, being able to have raised these 4 kids, and then had the privilege of helping out with the 8 grandchildren that we have, and I've had very close relationship with with all of them. And I knew that is, yeah, from my own experience, hard to juggle work and so. So when my oldest daughter Gina was having kids, so I would take her kids, my grandkids, from her during, when she's having some more babies. I'll take them and they'll come to me and they will stay, preschool. They'll go to what they call me Lola. Lola is grandma, so they'll go. They'll say it's time to go to Lola school, so they'll stay with me for months and months, and they will call it the Lola school. So so they grew up. They're always looking forward to going to Lola school. They are that's how your grandchildren, was very close to them. Every opportunity that we can help take care of them, from when they were infant, we would go. My son had kids, and they were in Denver. We would go there. They were in San Antonio, wherever they needed us. And then Gina was in her. My firstborn, her first two kids were in Belgium. They were in Belgium, so we went to Belgium. You just kind of help out. So I saw all these kids growing up, and that's kind of my pride and joy in life, is able to say, yeah, raised four kids. They turned out all right. Now I got these grandchildren. They're turning out really good too. That's if they ask me about accomplishment, that's the first thing in my mind is in the family. Okay.
Well,
Anything else?
it's obvious that family is really important to you. What values or life skills were important for you to teach your children?
Yeah, the values that I grew up with. I had the best. I think I had the best of both worlds. That I was able to see, what, the American values, were able to continue on with the Filipino values of respecting the elders and helping out. The family is important, religion is important. You do things together, open communication, and um, just I think in the Lola school they memorize their BIB, behavior influences behavior. you know just stay positive, and you'll be positive. Somebody is being negative, you have somebody has to uh be positive to get the cycle going, kind of thing. So those kinds of in teaching, them to just be Christian, just love one another, uh, and do, unto others so you want others to do unto you, kind of thing. So, and I think they're leading that good life.
Do you mind sharing more about your spirituality since you said that religion was important in teaching your
Yeah.
kids to be good
hmm
Christian?
hmm Yeah, well, religion is important to us. Well, the Philippines is a Catholic country, kind of thing. Um, I guess from this influence of the Spanish, the Spaniards were in the Philippines for over 300 years. So we kind of just inherited the religion. And it's mostly Catholic. And I grew up, having religion as part of the classroom curriculum, kind of thing. And then I went to St. Paul's College of Manila, which is the nuns and the religion, and and even in my work life, St. Joseph Hospital was run by nuns. So um, and then so religion is important to me and to the whole family, and I try to uh, be involved in the church too. When they were growing up, my husband and I were the sponsors of the Catholic Youth Organization. So we took other kids, in the youth group of the church, and we enjoyed doing that, taking them to conventions and having retreats with them, and having special classes for them. So yeah, uh, we were active in the church. We serve in parish council. We serve in the ministries, the different ministries of the church, and to this time, we still are uh, very active, in the church, and trying to help out any way we can, because it's important to us, and we wanted to show good example to our kids, and so that they can also do the same thing, for their kids. Right.
Great.
Anything else?
And then how did you expose your children to Filipino culture or language while living in the US?
Okay. I'm kind of proud of them because I think they are proud to, yeah, uh, have that culture. Yeah, access living in the best of both worlds. And in fact, my oldest granddaughter, she went to university, yeah, up north, and she became a member of the Filipino Association, Philippine American Association over there. And she was learning, the Philippine dances, and she was learning the Filipino culture even in that school. So she's, learning more. And we've always, uh, you know, gravitate the Filipino community where we live. It's a small community, but but we knew each other, and we were friends, and sharing birthday parties and social events with other Filipinos as they were growing up, and we were in the Freeport area, so they were exposed. But in school, they were the only Filipinos. But so we shared with others that are in the other communities, uh, to get that culture. And we did. I think way back in '70s, we did in the Brazosport area. We did I chaired a Philippine Day. You just in the museum we had samples of food and cultural dances and that thing for the community, because we were proud. Say, this is the Filipino community. We invited as many as we can that we know. Uh, to share the experience with American friends. Yeah, we did a Filipino Day in the Brazosport Art Center. Mhm, mhm. And they always ask, grandchildren always ask about how did you do this, how did you do that. They like stories, hearing stories about the Philippines, and they like traveling. So they've been at least four of the grandchildren have been to the Philippines. Mhm.
Going back to a point that you mentioned earlier about visiting the Philippines, how important was it to show your grandchildren where you grew up and um, that
Yeah.
side of the culture?
Yeah, it was my pride and joy to show them around, and I had arranged with my classmates, the people that I grew up with, to meet us in and show us around, and in fact, in one of our visit there, my university, the Philippine Women's University, because we're all now, old people, and they're now in the boards, of the university, the alumni association in there. In one of my visits, they took advantage. They wanted me to speak about, I did be the guest speaker. So I took the kids in one of our visits in the university. I said, I'll take the speaking engagement if you will give us a tour. so tour. So when we went there, yeah, they gave us a tour of the university because it has grown, and then I also wanted them to see my nursing school. So we went to the other universities too, and they made arrangement to, tour so that they saw where we grew up. And I showed them, we went to my hometown. So they also saw, where we grew up, and then my husband's hometown too. So you can see, and then like going to resorts also there in the Philippines, because a lot of beach. But they enjoy, yeah, and then they like the fruits that, the mango that they ate in the Philippines. Mhm. And it's important for me that they understand where we came from. Mhm. And I guess better appreciation of why you have to work hard to get to where you are now. Mhm.
I know that your grandchildren call you Lolo and Lola. Uh,
Mhm.
did you share any more of the language with them?
Yeah, they know how to say I love you. They say, and they know how to say thank you. And then now I regret not teaching them anymore. But yeah, I would give them when we go to the Philippines. I gave them a cheat sheets of the most common ones that they have to learn to be able to get there. Of course, they appreciate people appreciate with yeah yeah, thank you and please, and yeah, showing them some of the traditions in the Philippines, getting blessed, like when we say blessed, yeah, the after we grow up, you go to visit an older person, you ask for their blessing, and their bless, you put the kind of your hand over their forehead, kind of thing like that, and we call that manupo. I taught them how to do that. So when there's some Filipinos in the area, they will as a bless, and then they'll get the blessing. So those little things, yeah. But they're interested, yeah. And I think they're proud of their culture, that they're that yeah, that they have this heritage, and they talk about it in with their friends, and some of them look so American and bland, but they say, yeah, I'm really Filipino. But like the three other girls that we one time we took them on a cruise, and in the cruise boat, most of the staff, the people that are working there in the service organization, there's a lot of Filipinos in there, and they were teenagers then. They will be they'll go to the bar and they will be ignored, but then they started talking. My granddaughter started counting in Tagalog, in the Filipino language, so they were surprised. Oh, they said, yeah, we're really Filipinos. You see, my lolo and lola are over there. And then since then, every time they see them coming, the drinks, their cokes are already ready for them, so they so I think they're proud to say that they're Filipinos. Mhm.
All right, so we're just about wrapping up. I've got a couple of last minute questions. So, what are your hopes for the Asian American and the Filipino communities in the US?
Okay, I want them to be recognized for all their skills and talents, because they do have lots of skills and talents, and they're hard, as a general rule, they're hard workers. The Asian community is hard workers. In fact, I feel proud when all this, during graduations, you see these graduation programs and the newspaper who all are the valedictorians. From the surnames, you can see that there are Asians. I guess because studying hard is still part of the culture that the parents tell their children. So I just want them to continue with their dreams and prove to the world that um, they are very talented and skilled people, and I've met a lot of professionals in various occupations, even those in service organizations. They're very hardworking group of people. Mm. To just keep on, yeah. And I know sometimes it's hard because we're in a where this is not our country, but they just have to keep on trying to prove themselves. Mhm. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much on behalf of the Houston Asian American Archive. It's been a true pleasure.
Okay. Great pleasure talking to you too, Jessica. Thank you very much for the privilege.
Of course.